Hey, I'm Karen. I'm going to talk to you about the third part of volume photography, which is what to do on the day of the shoot. Things to think about and look out for to help your big day go more smoothly. Now, the most important thing I can tell you is have a good assistant with you. For me, I'm just an independent photographer, and a lot of times my husband is the person who comes out there with me. If I don't have him available, just make sure you have somebody else that you trust. They're going to be handling all of the money and all the orders. Make sure they can count and do really well with money, because it's one of those things once you get after the shoot and you're counting up everything and you're accounting for what you've taken in versus what you have in front of you, you just want to make sure all of that matches. So minimizing those errors is huge when it comes to doing up your paperwork afterwards. So having a good assistant is very important. A good assistant is also going to keep you on track and help answer a lot of questions for coaches and parents and different people that are there that day. I like to make sure that I have at least one person with me to do that stuff. Now, I also need help with getting the kids lined up and organized to come in as it's their time for their team or their group, doing all their individual photos, making sure that they're facing the camera a certain way and that they're being posed a certain way. A lot of times the parents are there or coaches are there, and they will pitch in to just help you. You can often just ask them to come over and, maybe get the kids ready or keep them tamed down or maybe keep them out of your set area or whatever. It's important to have people there that you can work with, and even if you don't bring all those people there, there's usually plenty of people around to help. Having supplies there with you is really important. Of course, I always bring some sort of folding table that we can set up on that's going to be stable enough, because you're going to have all the order forms and you're going to need people to have a space to write their order forms and fill them out. A lot of people don't bring their stuff filled out, so they end up doing it there that day, or maybe they want to order a package at the last minute. So make sure you have lots of pens. I like to bring blank paper and markers or pens with me so that if we have to write a sign, hey, line starts here, or pictures this way, or whatever, bring gaffer tape, bring stuff like that, so that you have just some basic office supplies that you can make up any sort of notes that you need, or signs, at the last minute that you may not have thought about. I also bring little cones, little fluorescent cones that I can kind of stick around the area that I don't want kids walking around. Maybe it's like behind my umbrella stands or something for my lighting, or just, places that maybe I want them to line up behind a certain line. So I'll take gaffer tape and put it on the floor and then put an arrow up to the line so they know that the line starts there. However you want to organize your stuff, having like a few different things available to help you keep that together is super helpful. Make sure you have extra memory cards available and that they're empty, that you've already formatted them, because that's the kind of stuff that'll slow you down when you're trying to get all these kids done in a short amount of time, or teams, photographed, and you just don't need that stuff taking up any of your time and making it more complicated. Make sure you have all of your camera batteries and flash batteries charged, or if you need power supply to your lighting equipment, make sure that's available way beforehand. If you can afford to, I would highly recommend having backups of all your camera gear. For me, I'll take out one camera body and be shooting with it, but I have two backup camera bodies. And they're not exactly the same, but they are similar, and I know how to use them, and they're ready to go. I make sure the batteries are charged in those. I make sure that there's extra memory cards in those. I want to make sure everything is ready to go on a moment's notice if something should happen and I need it. Have extra lighting equipment. It doesn't have to be exactly the same if you can't afford to do that, but having other types of lights available so that you can continue on doing exactly what you're doing if needed. I also have, make sure you have your background. Maybe if you're doing green screen, you want to have an extra green screen. It might not be the same size, but if you have something additional, that'll really help. Besides having extra equipment on hand, let's see, setting up your actual shoot, we want to make sure that you've already done like a run through before you ever got there that day for your actual lighting setup. If you are having a green screen, make sure you have that available. Are you indoors or outdoors? That makes a huge difference too. Plan for all of that stuff. Do a test run before you ever go out there to make sure that you are ready for all the things that you could possibly run into, or at least most of them. I mean, you can't always know what is going to happen that day, but being able to try and anticipate some of the things that you'll be up against will really help walk you through those situations in case you need to rethink something. And when you're at the shoot, that's not the time to rethink anything. Again, trying to minimize where all the kids are or where all the people are while you're shooting is really helpful. Kind of damage control, make sure your lights aren't out to where people can trip over your stands, or they're not walking up in between your lights to get to the set. Try to have a good flow of things, like an entrance to the set and an exit, or keep everybody back a certain distance. Let the teachers and the coaches and whoever else is there help you with that kind of stuff. Indoor versus outdoor setup, you want to think about the lighting that's necessary. A lot of times if you're inside of a gym or in a church or some other place where there's overhead lighting that's fluorescent, you want to think about how that's going to affect your white balance. Do you need to set your white balance a certain way? Are you able to control the lighting? I know if you're outdoors, even if you're in a covered area, you have daylight to think about, and that's going to change your exposure settings as the day wears on. And do you want to constantly be thinking about having to adjust your exposure settings? Getting that stuff ready beforehand is a really great idea, and that's the last thing you want to have to think about as time goes on. Am I going to have to adjust the color balance and exposure to all these images throughout the day once I get back to my computer and I'm uploading all of these? Or how can I minimize having to change the exposure and the color balance on all of these pictures? Think too about how you set up your lighting. Are you going to have to move your lights around when you have individual shots versus team photos? A lot of times, if you want to do individual shots and have a certain type of lighting, you may have lights to the sides of them or behind them or something, and then maybe one or two lights in front of them. If you're doing team photos and you're actually shooting people and not doing a composite, if you're shooting them all together, you may want to have both of your lights back behind you and raise them up really high. Those are things that might slow you down if you have like a whole bunch of kids and teams that you have to process really quickly. So being prepared for that stuff can really minimize the time that you take the day of your shoot. There are other circumstances that we've come across. A lot of times we try to have the kids doing all the same pose. That makes things a little bit simpler and helps people run through the process a lot quicker, but we occasionally have parents come up and want their siblings' picture taken together, and they want the package printed that way. So is that something you can do? If you're doing green screen and then you have some sort of an overlay that types the names in and has that information on the photos, will that fit on your picture? Will that fit into the template that you've chosen? If you can accommodate that, you may want to. If not, if it's too difficult, you may want to be upfront with people about that and let them know, hey, this is only one kid per picture, however you want to do that sort of thing. I also want to mention crop consideration. When you're taking your photos, you want to make sure you have enough space around your subject, above and to the sides of them, so that you can crop accurately later and not take out important details. I find a lot of times when shooting kids, they're often, maybe long and lanky, and then you've got nothing to the sides of them. So do you really need all of the kid in the picture, or do you want to just do like 3/4 length, or maybe just from the waist up? How much do you want to fit into your picture? So think about that first of all, based on the template you've chosen or what you want to offer in your actual photo. And then from there you can kind of shoot accordingly and give yourself enough space. Now, also the last thing you want to do is have way too much space around your subject, and then you're having to crop a lot out and zoom in on them, and then all of a sudden they're all pixelated because either you didn't shoot in raw large or have a big enough file size to cut down to begin with, or they're just too far away. So think about those kinds of things and shoot as close and tight in as you can, but give yourself enough space for cropping and the different size photos that you're going to be offering as well. I've already kind of mentioned coaches helping organize kids. When I have my barcode system, I have the coaches or whoever hand them out to the kids, and it's usually right before the photo. I've had it to where the coaches will help and hand out the barcodes to all the kids and they're waiting in line, but they'll sit there and just mutilate the thing, and then the system doesn't read it because the barcode is all messed up. So you may want to consider that if you're using a barcode system. Do you want to use a tripod? Do you not want to use a tripod? I've had mixed experiences with that. Sometimes when we're doing like Little League, these kids are so small and you need to get down on their level and you want to kind of shoot up on them so that, they look bigger and everything. But if you have a tripod, it just becomes really awkward to like balance that and move it around for like every person. And having a tripod kind of, it defeats the purpose. Like, you don't want to be moving stuff around. So you set up a tripod to make things uniform and easy. But when all your kids are just different heights, it makes it difficult. So sometimes I just like to free shoot, and I kind of put an X on the floor with some gaffer tape or something to tell myself, hey, I want to pretty much be here in this spot. And then of course I put an X on the floor wherever the kid is supposed to stand. That way I can try to, minimize the variance between each photo, and it makes it a lot easier when you're editing and you're trying to batch edit your stuff. But you may want to think about all the things that a tripod involves and what the pros and cons are of using one versus not using one. Staying on schedule is really important. A lot of times, if you don't have a schedule set up before that day, everybody just shows up all at once. It's a mess. There's parents everywhere. Do you even want to have parents be allowed to come up in the picture area? Sometimes that can be a whole can of worms. They want to fix Susie's bow, or their hair doesn't look right, or, stand this way, or make that face, or this face. Don't smile like that. Give me a real smile, not a fake smile. And it turns into this whole thing. So do you want parents to be there? There are polite ways to let them know, hey, kids up here and coaches, but parents, can stay over back here, however you want to say it. But we just need to find a way to stay on schedule, and the best way to do that, I have found, is when you're organizing the shoot with the lead coach or whoever the person is that you've organized the shoot with. Try to get a schedule from them. Say, hey, look, I may only need 15 minutes per team, so we have 20 some teams. We're going to be here 6 or 8 hours. Every 15 minutes, oh, hey, can you work in a 5-minute break for me so I can run to the bathroom or drink some water or something? You may want to have those little breaks in there if possible. I had several years where I was pregnant. I've got 3 kids, and at different points in time, I was at these shoots very pregnant, and it was a little complicated getting over to the bathrooms that were on the other side of the field. So I asked them to work in a little break for me here and there so I could waddle across and do my thing. But if you don't need that sort of thing, and if you can just move as fast as possible, and that's not a concern for you, then just be concerned about getting all of your teams at certain times and making sure that flows more smoothly. You will always have people come late. You will always have people come early. And you can't really minimize that, or you can't eliminate that, but you can minimize that by having a schedule to begin with. So any way that you can set that up is better than nothing. Let's see what else. Okay. Sometimes when kids aren't there on time, they want to be worked into a team photo later. I've done it both ways, where I've accommodated them, and then sometimes where it's just not really possible. The issue that we might have with working somebody into a team photo is lighting. Sometimes if you're shooting outdoors or even in a covered outdoor environment, you have totally different lighting conditions at the time that they come versus the time that their team is there earlier. And trying to work on that in Photoshop and make it believable and look good, and considering where you're going to put them, because you already had it organized with the number of kids that you had at the time. So if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You're just going to have to make your own call as far as what you want to do on that and what your policy is before the parents start asking for those types of things. So one other thing I want to mention is taking payments the day of the shoot. Are you just taking cash? Do you accept cards? What about checks? In my experience, we've put on the order forms that we accept cash only. It's great if they have exact change, but we don't put that on there. We usually bring change so that we can make it. And as time goes on, you're going to get change anyways and be able to make change for people. We've not had good luck with checks. And the reason being, it's not that we don't trust people to pay by check, but you get the random person that says, hey, can you hold this till Friday? Or, whatever the situation is, you have to call on these checks beforehand. I always do. I don't deposit any checks without calling the bank first just to verify that the funds are in there, because there's a bounce check. How are you going to get a fee from the people to cover that bounce fee? Usually it's going to fall on you. And then you're holding up picture orders for people and wanting to make sure all the funds clear before you place your order for these prints. So you're making everybody else wait. And it just seems to be a big waste of time to have to call all these banks and verify checks. I find that it's much easier to just accept cash. If you're giving out the order forms to the coaches to print out and give to the kids and their parents a week or two or a couple weeks before the shoot, you're essentially giving them time to get cash out or wait till payday or whatever the situation is if you have a pay up front shoot. So think about those things. The other thing is taking credit cards. If you have one of those little square readers and you use Stripe or Square, a lot of times you can just swipe a card at the time of. Of course, you want to make sure all that stuff is set up way in advance so that you're not having to fiddle with it that day. But the downside to it is that, sometimes the card readers don't work, you have to manually enter stuff. I know there's a little bit of a fee to using cards. You know, a lot of times it's just 2 or 3%, and that's still totally doable. If you're going to get more sales as a result of using cards, if people are going to actually use credit cards, or if they're going to use a debit or whatever they do, you might get more sales out of the deal. So it's up to you if you want to advertise it that way, or if you just want to allow certain people who ask you and then just take those payments from there. So we've never advertised that we take cards, but we will. And the same with checks. It's not that we won't take them, but we don't want to advertise that because the majority of people will bring you a check and it just gets really messy. So the easiest way is for us to just say that we're accepting cash only and hope from there that everybody brings the right change and it all works out. When you get back home and you're counting up all your money and you're comparing it against the orders that you received and how much you should have received, it's a lot easier when there's cash in front of you. We've even purchased those cash counting machines because there's just so much afterwards that it's hard to count them accurately and make sure that you're staying on top of exactly what you've collected. It becomes a little tedious. So that's pretty much it for this third part, things to think about on the day of the shoot. And in my next video, I'm going to talk about the post workflow, everything you do when you get home and how to get everything completed and out the door. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.